Hello and welcome to How to Stay Married... So far. Bit of a different one today.
Yes, yeah. Well, just bearing in mind the old preamble before we get cracking. I know we've got things that we've got to film after this, but I love pumpkin seeds.
Okay.
I just wanted to share that because actually I think I'm drawn to really healthy things.
I'm sure that's made everybody's day so much bloody better.
What I like about most podcasts is when they don't talk about what they're going to talk about.
I hate that.
Oh, I don't.
I'm always like, oh, shut up and get on with it.
Really? Okay, we'll crack on. What are we talking about?
Okay, so it's a bit different today because actually I don't think we've ever brought in a clip of anybody else.
No.
Have we?
No.
No, we haven't. And I discovered this rather fabulous young man called Cameron Caxi. Hope I said that right.
Caxi.
Because I often talk about the bull walk, don't I, that we watch on YouTube, who's, you know, they are an American political YouTube, not liberals like us, they are Republicans, but they're
their description it says liberals.
No, they're not. They're easygoing Republicans. Yeah.
It is a really good channel, actually. It lacks the hysteria of some other channels.
I love that Tim Miller. He's just so miserable.
Yeah,
anyway, he's miserable and he's got a very droll young man that they do a sort of a Gen Z look at stuff. Extremely smart, Cameron is. And I just fell into a bit of a wormhole to listen. I love watching I love that intergenerational thing, there's just not enough of it.
Richard E. Grant coined the phrase. He said, foster young friendships with younger people. He said, it keeps you plugged in.
We learn so much.
Not technologically. I think everyone assumes that younger generations is about staying plugged in technologically, but it's about ideas. It's about discussions. It's about, different visions of life.
Yeah, I love talking to younger people because it makes me realise what a total fucking idiot I am.
Well, you said it.
But anyway, there's loads to watch and listen to with Cameron and Tim. I think it's a fairly new podcast, but you can watch them on YouTube as well. And I love it. But I'm zeroing in on this particular moment with Cameron. This was off the back of, he was talking about the Doge wankers, all those young
Trump's
people that
lackeys.
No, not Trump's, Elon's.
Sorry, Musk's lackeys.
Elon's flunkies. Do you know one of them's called Big Balls?
Big Balls. Maybe he's got big balls.
And
sometimes nicknames are accurate.
And they're like 19, 20, 25, and they're the ones that are going through everybody's
balls.
Deciding who's going to get bloody sacked or not.
So do you think Big Balls is rummaging?
So anyway, he was very funny and dry and derogatory about that group of men. And then it's moved seamlessly into, he was then talking about how lonely men, lonely people, as we know, can be extraordinarily kind and sensitive and all those wonderful things. But also some lonely people can turn their feelings of loneliness and being left out of things into a kind of rage. It's like, if you can't have this, then I can't have this, so I don't want any of you to have this. And I thought that was very relevant around adolescence and everything we're talking about.
Adolescence being the Netflix series. Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think some of the topics that, you're absolutely right. I heard you listening to the preamble, the idea that isolated men you can get really nice, lonely people, but it can also turn to anger and it can turn to hate. And I think, weirdly, there was also a bit of a zeitgeisty moment, like the one we're currently going through with adolescence, when the first Joker film came out. And the first Joker film became kind of hijacked by incel culture, or did it get hijacked by incel culture? It got hijacked by the mainstream's fear that it was speaking to incel culture. So what I mean by that is Joker was about a man, obviously, Arthur Fleck, who was marginalised, isolated, felt unheard, unseen, looked over, invisible, like the world wasn't catering for him. And that does speak to the truth of many young men. It's a bit like what they said to me in rehab. We can all be angry. It's what we do with anger. Yeah. And I think it's how that's translated. Now, I saw in something like The Joker, tragedy, trauma, sadness, and a need for empathy. Whereas, the suggestion was that others saw in it a justification to go on the killing rampage and hate everyone and hate women and hate men and everything in between. So I think it's really interesting that you've brought this discussion, which I thought is such a fascinating discussion, as you say, kind of unusual for the Bulwark YouTube channel. Little section here about dating for Gen Zers.
Yeah. So he moved from that
Yeah.
from that discussion around these Doge plonkers into some advice for Gen Z. And he's very cool, good looking, young. He's very laid back. Actually, look him up and hear about his actual life, because boy, oh boy, has that guy gone through some
Dangerously close to hipster, but I don't necessarily think hipster should always be a bad thing.
No, he's cool.
Yeah, he's cool.
He's cool, and he's been through it a lot, and he's a smart guy. So he said, right, I'm going to give Gen Z men some advice
And this
on
is
dating.
about Gen Z men.
Because all these men, that are, and then he talks about, doesn't he, like he'd gone on Reddit, and there was a whole sort of, did you call it a stream or a thread on Reddit?
Yeah.
Around why I can't get a girl. And it was all this stuff, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. And he really took umbrage with this and said, actually, some of the most beautiful, gorgeous women I know go out with wholly unattractive people. So it's not, being gorgeous is going to help, but it's also about how you approach women, not as some weird fucking species from some other planet, but maybe like as a human being that you could maybe have a conversation with and get to know. But anyway, so he's given 3 tips, so we thought we'd use these
And
tips today.
before we jump in on that, I think it's always good whenever sort of I don't know whether you're going to like this or not, but you're a baby boomer, strictly.
Oh, fuck.
Born in 1964, you are a baby boomer. You're the same generation as my mum.
I didn't used to be a baby boomer.
You've always been a baby boomer.
Is it when you're born or how old you are now?
It's when you're born.
Is that the same thing?
And it reaches to 1964. I think I'm a millennial, and I think I'm right bang in the middle from 64 on. And so Gen Zers, we're now coming through, I think the 12, 13, 14-year-olds now are Gen Alpha or Gen A.
I haven't even heard that one.
Yeah, so Gen Zers are very much our youngest daughter and her sort of milieu.
Well, exactly, and a lot of what Cameron says, you and I, as we were listening to him, I go, oh, that's what Maddie would say, our 22-year-old, is she 22? Is she 22?
I thought that was your stomach. That was so bizarre.
It's because I'm really fancying a biscuit.
Can I just say, you've stolen my top.
I know, I love this one. It's like you've worn it in so perfect. It's soft. It's so soft.
I know.
Just imagine that you're on me, and then you'd be glad to give me your t-shirt.
Okay, we're just going to terminate this podcast just for 20 seconds.
So a lot of it, and in fact, I'm going to make the girls sit and just have a little look at Cameron, because I think he gives me hope.
So unusually, what we're going to do is we're going to play his tips. There is also at the end of it an addendum by the host of the program, who we love, which I think is a really important addendum to the 3 tips.
You know, one thing I would wish. What? I wish every time Cameron brings up Netanyahu or Gaza, Tim skirts around it, and I think of Tim as a brave man, and I want to say, why don't you just talk about it? This is a Gen Z person who I believe is Jewish. He said he was Jewish, who is wanting to talk about this
in a critical way.
He's very critical of Netanyahu, and he's demotivated. They say they demotivated their generation because they have tried to do something and tried to make people listen. Okay. So yeah. If Tim were ever to see this, Tim, come on, have the conversation. Have a whole podcast talking to him.
So what we're going to do, which we've never done before, is we are going to actually show this on screen. If you're listening on podcast, obviously you're going to hear it. But also if you're watching, we're going to drop this in at the bottom, edit it in, and what have you. Because we don't usually edit things, but we are going to with this one. So shall we hear his first tip for Gen Z? And this is specifically advice to Gen Z males.
And also bear in mind that before that he said, it's not all about being good looking, or as Incel would say, being a Chad.
So here's 3 dating tips for Gen Z men. This is gonna blow your fucking mind. And it's all pretty easy. Number 1, if you are not friends with any women, if you can't be friends with women, you are not fit to date a woman. Dating, love, sex, these are not your first concern. Make female friends. Get to know them. Understand how they live. Can't do it in person? Do it online. Make an effort to understand other people before you try to get in their beds.
I love this tip. And I love this tip. I would say that, obviously I've had lots of male friends, but most of my most meaningful friends or enjoyable friendships over my life, or really authentic friendships, let's put it like that, have been with women. I really like female
You're
company.
lovely with women.
I love female company. I love the unpredictability. I love the randomness. I love the intensity. I get a little bit annoyed when just the childlike silliness of a bloke like me then annoys them, because I can see why it annoys you.
What, you
But-
mean when you're 7?
yeah. But sometimes even a 7-year-old man is kind of fun occasionally. But no, I mean, I really, and what I love most, I'll throw this out there before.
And do you remember that right from your like first girlfriend even? Do you
Yeah.
remember because you were set on a good path with your first girlfriend, weren't you? 'Cause
Yeah,
you
I
were
really
friends.
was. I mean, although it was a very chaotic childhood, the weirdest part of my childhood, of which there were lots of very traumatic moments, lots of issues, lots of experiences, and I've been in a lot of therapy around that. Threaded throughout it, which is such a contradiction, was my mother's politics, which, albeit she led a confused life, there was some very good, sound, feminist politics in there. And that, they often say that when young men or men come across that it can sometimes, you can have a reaction against it. Most kids rebel against their parents. Where I rebelled against my mum was in being more reliable and, for want of a better expression, well behaved. I wasn't going and running amok and disappearing for weeks on end. I, in fact, went the opposite way. And I had a relationship with Jane, Zoe, for 4 years. And that relationship was a friendship and it was a companionship. And
So it set you on the right road, really. If you'd
I had 4 years of getting to know a woman very close up.
I'm just realising that actually as you're talking, and I'm thinking maybe if you'd started off with just quite a sexual relationship, that would have changed. That's why it's so important.
So important.
As parents to try and foster
So important.
your daughters and sons having friends, because here is an absolute moment.
What's that?
I have never had a straight male friend.
Wow.
And so
And yet I
it
consider
was
you my
only
best
coming
friend.
to me as we were talking about Cameron there and what he was advising, that I thought, oh my God, but I've never had a straight male friend.
But does it work backwards? I don't know if it necessarily works back that
No,
way.
it's not as important. I really think that, because I just think generalising here, women have a deeper understanding of people, that we look, we delve more, don't we? So, but I went to an all-girls school, then I went to stage school, there was just a few boys and they were only gay boys, and I didn't grow up in a street with loads of boys around, and boys were just this thing that I just worried about. Boys worried me from like a young age.
But can I just say, boys worried me.
So straight men, I didn't know how to talk to them without them coming on to me, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but the really interesting thing about this advice, which is what's quite telling, and I hear what you're saying, is that I think this is kind of really sage, sensible, clever and crucial advice. But it's one of those rare occasions where not everything is applicable to both genders. I don't necessarily think it's applicable to you that you need
Not
to
in the same way. Yeah.
Not in the same
No,
way.
but I feel sad about it.
No, yeah, perhaps. I mean, the difficulty for me is that most friendships, and we've talked about it elsewhere in other podcasts and coffee mornings and stuff like that, is my idea that there's always potentially some kind of desire for a relationship. I think under a certain age, there's that. I think when you get to my age, there isn't that. So those female friends of mine who I'm not necessarily desirous of you, but that's an older thing. I think when I was younger, I was a bit more simplistic. I thought, well,
It's so true,
could this
isn't it?
lead to
Because
something?
one of the things that I really, really love is that our daughters have so many male friends as well as female, and they're easy with men because they are with you. My dad was a lovely dad, but it wasn't like you are with them. They're playful, you're playful, and so they're very playful. But 8 times out of 10 when they've come back and told me about a friend of theirs, I'm thinking it's a bit more, he's not thinking of you as just a friend in the way that you are.
But
It's
I
weird.
think the advice about, so in a weird way, the advice he's giving, or gives, when I was the age of Gen Zers, I was enacting that day to day, every day in my relationship with Jane. We grew into a responsibility towards each other, not an obligation. We enjoyed time together. I don't even actually remember us arguing that much. I don't remember us having big fallings out or big misunderstandings. Things didn't seem massively complicated. I wasn't interested in playing a field. We had a security in each other. We had a very, our sexual awakening happened together. It was it was satisfying. It was, so when I look back and I think to myself, my God, if I hadn't had that long-term first relationship, I almost get a chill of fear, because I'm kind of like, oh my God, what could have happened there? Because what happened later in my life was everything you would have expected to. Yeah, it was carnage. You would have expected it to happen in my teenage years. I have to confess, when drink came in, it did all start to go pear-shaped. But yeah, that advice of getting to know women are...
Yeah, and I'd love people to comment underneath
just
about
deeper.
that. Because people will say, well, that's really easy to say, but it's so much more difficult. But I think there's further good advice on that, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, I entirely agree with them. And I think it's really important to strike friendship, understand women. You can't expect to have a relationship with a gender in any form, or anyone in that gender, if you have spent zero time understanding anything about them, or even worse than that, maligning whatever it is that makes women of a certain generation tick. I mean, the problem with all of this is not everyone in Gen Z is the same. Not every Gen Z woman is a Gen Z woman, if you know what I mean. So is this tip 2?
Number 2, approach women with the goal of making friends. If it turns into something else, okay, cool. If it doesn't, and she's not interested, you made a friend, and friends are good to have. And beyond that, if you aren't okay just being friends, if this isn't someone you could be friends with, you probably shouldn't be in a relationship anyway.
Exactly. And how do you do that? How do you make friends with a woman? And I think, first of all, don't see them as aliens from another planet.
No.
Don't, it's very, very difficult, isn't it? If you fancy someone, to not feel impatient with that. So it takes a little bit of patience. I always said to the girls, if you're going to meet someone at work, or meet somebody through a friend, because to just meet somebody in a club or on a dating app, everything's laid out, isn't it? The stall is out. This is what's going to happen. So it is about asking just a really simple question and listening. One of the greatest tools that a man has, giving you this one for free, guys. Whatever you look like, doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter how much money you've got, doesn't matter whether you've got a car or not. If you look at that woman and you really listen to her, that is intoxicating.
Right.
And if you're really listening and then responding rather than reacting, that's the start of a relationship, whether that be a friendship, whether that be a good acquaintance, whether that be eventually a sexual relationship. That to me is the key.
Yes, but, and I don't wish to
From
take
a
us,
female
I don't
POV.
wish to take us off on a married at first sight tangent, but there is an older woman. But there is an older woman in the current episode of Married at First Sight Australia, where the poor guy she's with can do nothing other than listen, and even listening gets him nowhere. No. But
I'm talking about if you're just coming to meet somebody and you've got somebody that goes, well, just let me just tell you, you're going to walk away from them.
Yeah.
You're listening and responding
Absolutely.
to see whether you like them, because that's the other thing. I think a lot of men might approach a woman with fear, right, and going, oh God, will she like me? Will she like me? Will she like me? Spin that on its head and go, I kind of like the look of her and her vibe, but you know what? I'm going to go and see if I really like her, because then you're shifting the power balance. You're equalising it a bit. So it's not just, will she like me? Will we like each other?
I think
better way.
Yeah, and I think another part of the problem for young men and for men in general is baked into any interaction with women, whether, platonically or not. There is an element of, am I going to be successful? Or am I going to be a failure? And so men will attach a lot of losing face or masculine pride, this is all toxic masculinity, to the success or failure. And there may need, and what I think is great about this advice is don't go into it even on those terms, because going into anything with anyone on those terms, you are immediately throwing into the kind of, the equation, am I going to be interesting enough, or can I win this? Can I succeed at this? And I hate to say it, men operate very simplistically on a win. Am I winning? Whatever this relationship is, even if it's, am I winning in this relationship? And I think that's something. The other thing I've sensed and seen in some Gen Zers I've come across or seen in groups and seen in the media and social media, men have a most astonishing and I think really disturbing sense of entitlement. And it's a really odd thing. There is this idea, regardless of who you are, what you look like, what your
We've
qualifications
seen that with some of
are.
our daughter's friends.
But I've seen it with my
I've,
generation.
this is like 3 messages have I given you now. Are you not interested in me? It's
Absolutely.
like, calm down.
Absolutely.
Calm down.
One of the things, and I think that sense of entitlement is just
So unsexy.
so unsexy. But I hate to say it, I don't know where I think there's a problem in the easiness of applying these rules. If you are a young man who has that sense of entitlement, I don't quite know what's going to unpick you from having that sense of entitlement and sitting back a little bit more and going, okay, I need to kind of...
what you're doing there is what you need there is introspection.
Yeah, introspection,
and introspection,
self-awareness.
unfortunately, is something that comes with maturity.
Yeah.
But if there's somebody listening to this with a genuine open heart and mind and wanting to question themselves and ask themselves, really, why aren't they? Those are the people we're speaking to. Some ignoramus arsehole, he's going to be, he's going to be lonely all his life, isn't he? But if you really want to know, I think these things you and I and Cameron are saying are really, really helpful. You have to believe in it, because it's like everything, isn't it? We're so impatient. We want to lose weight, so how can we take a pill to lose weight? We want to make more friends, so who can everything, we want it to happen quickly. That's the big problem. You've got to just take off a few layers of the onion. Really sit. What do they actually mean when they say be myself? What do they actually mean when they say really listen? Honestly, it's one of the biggest secrets that women keep. They will say, they will whisper it to each other. Oh my God, you really listen to me. Women find it very sexy.
No, absolutely.
But men are too impatient.
Well, you're right, and I think but I also think it's a kind of cross-gender situation where everyone is so busy trying to understand things more quickly, trying to orientate themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's always born of toxic
No, of course
masculinity
not.
and control or a lack of attention. I do think we are all encouraged in every way, and in different ways for men and women, and straight men and straight gay women. We're all encouraged in different ways to be moving on, to be making.
And also,
there's a speediness to culture.
Yeah.
And I just want to finish this thought.
Sorry, John.
I think one of the other things that I think is really difficult for Gen Zers, and I think this really does matter, is the conditions in which you meet people. I mean, it was interesting that when he gives this tip, this Gen Zer, the host of the Bulwark says something along the lines
Well,
of...
we've got that clip, so
No, I haven't got that. I've got the addendum. I haven't got his. He has another category. He has a 4th tip, which he recommends, which actually isn't right, where he says, try speaking to women in public. And I don't actually think just going up to someone, because of the nature of things out there, my last line of advice to a young boy, if I had a son, would be, if you see a woman in a coffee shop, which he says, and you like the look of them, go over and engage them in conversation. No. Most women now will see that potentially as weird and creepy.
Depends how you do it. I disagree with your disagreement. Tim Miller says that. He says, go up and just say, can I get your social media? If somebody thinks,
But that girl's forever being asked for their snap.
But that was wrong. But then Cameron's advice was much better. Just passing by, like you're leaving. Listen, he says, this guy's moustache, he needs to get rid of it, right? Just something just playful and light. It's the heaviness. It's the uninvitedness.
It's the closing
that makes
the deal.
our skin crawl. It's the settling in and sitting down and you think, oh, fucking hell, I'm going to be stuck with this guy. It's lightness of touch, on your toes,
Entirely
almost
agree.
about to leave. And that kind of engagement, face to face, is way better than a dating app or anything like that.
Entirely agree. But the danger here and the difficulty is, what role models are these young men seeing that happen with in order to have the confidence or the wherewithal or the knowledge as to how? That's an incredibly sophisticated, self-confident thing to do, to sit back into the ease of who you are. And the problem, and what I'm saying is, and I saw it in this, in the brilliant documentary series that just came to an end last night, The School Swap with America and the UK. And there was a really interesting moment where I was watching it really closely. This boy struck a romantic relationship with the American girl. He was getting upset and he was in amongst his friends saying goodbye to her as she was flying back. And as I looked at him, I was seeing a passive, impassive, untouched, unmoved, weird boy, kind of whose face was acknowledging no emotion. Then cut away from that, and you saw that he was breaking down into tears. And it's that weird thing of when boys are around boys, all interactions with girls, and I've seen it even with all my daughters, and I've seen it in other relationships, there's an element of, with a big C and a little c, closing the deal. There's this element, you see it on trains where people sidle up. Men are about closing the door, and that's what I mean.
Because they're behaving like dogs, sniffing out.
Yeah.
Don't sniff out. Because not if you want not if you want a good person that's going to be interested in you and love you and fancy you and wanna partner you.
Yeah.
If she feels you're just sniffing out like a damn dog, you're not going to find that. Now, there will be some people that want to be sniffed out by a dog, and that's fine as well.
Yeah.
But if you're saying I can't find love, and you're approaching looking for love and looking for a relationship in that way, it's not going to work.
And also, interestingly, the advice here again, is it Cameron? Is that the boy?
Yeah.
The Gen Z? Pivot back to his first tip. Because if you observe the first tip, you won't find yourself making this mistake of trying to secure the deal. It will inherently not happen. Because I think that's the most attractive way. And anyway, let's get to his third tip, because I think his third piece of advice I love this third bit of advice.
Number 3, most importantly, be true to yourself. Some of the smoothest guys I know are total fucking nerds.
Yep.
The best way to look like a loser is try to be someone you're not. If you're a little weird, own that shit. Be who you are. It's very magnetic. Trust me. The biggest crush I had in high school, when I told her how I felt about her, the thing she said that really made me understand this, when she was kind of saying yes and no at the same time, very high school, she said, I've always appreciated that you are unapologetically yourself. This doesn't mean you should be brazen. Doesn't mean you should be aggressive. It just means if you can act like somebody who is being true to themselves and comfortable in their own skin, people respond to that.
That is so important. And what I would say is, again, referring to that documentary we've just watched, this is where a school from South London swaps with a school in Arkansas. And in the last episode, this kid's kind of like, she's a little bit sort of geeky and she's a bit uncomfortable with herself and just hates her looks, quite dysmorphic. But she's just gorgeous, wasn't she? Just gorgeous in every way. And she was uncomfortable with the boys and talking to them, and she wasn't going to get invited to the prom. But the guy that she ended up with, when she just came and sat at the table, she just sat at the table and we were like, oh, and she was just like, just bantering with him, wasn't she? And she was just unapologetically herself, and everything else melted away. So that it's not always your fault if you're not being unapologetically yourself. Some people don't make space for you to be like that. So if you feel incredibly awkward around somebody, maybe they're just being a little bit removed, a little cool, then maybe they're not the right person for you to experiment being your authentic self.
They're not allowing you to
my
flourish.
dad has always said, run like the wind from any, my dad's Arabic, by the way, if somebody's well, run like the wind from those who sneer. People who sneer at you. Never left my head that. Sneering. You know, you can be cheeky with people, you can be antagonistic even, but sneering is a very particular
I love
kind
what he
of thing.
says about, because I think a lot of people mistake that. I just want to be the authentic me. Or you often hear in dating shows, and you hear people say, over a certain age, this gets more entrenched the older. When I hear men of my age going, this is what I'm like it or lump it, or you hear women say it too, you know, and you're like, what must it be like to have reached the point in your life to say that I am not going to change, evolve, or shift in anything? Or that means you're not going to learn. That means you're not going to be open to people. Yeah, but I love what he says there about being yourself, but not being brazen.
Not aggressively.
Not aggressively, because I think,
which is what you've just explained.
Yeah.
This is
who I am, and there is an element of staying true. What I love about what he's saying there, and when he mentions the G word, the geek word. We are in such an environment.
The N-word, nerd.
No, sorry. We're in such an environment. I mean, just this morning we were talking about something where I allowed myself to go towards something that I feel and I've never really talked about publicly, which was what my original love affair with Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit was. Immediately it resonated with other people on our live feed called Coffee MOANING, which we do each day. And I was reminded of something that wasn't, you know, normally people just go, oh, you're into fantasy. No, it's like, no, this is about something else. And this is true to me. And it's that sort of thing. It's not being embarrassed of those elements of your personality that aren't sexy. And I don't mean sexy in a literally sexual way, but like sexy in the world, or, you know, are on brand or zeitgeisty, or you haven't watched the right show. You know, there's nothing worse than Gen Zers who say, well, you can't like all, I heard someone say this to someone the other day. They said, you can't like all music. You've got to like a type. And they're like, no, I like I listen to music, and I hear all kinds of music. And
I do think and I was having this conversation with our daughters the other day when they said, you know, I feel like sometimes I just don't know who I am because I'm all these different people. And I said, stop. Stop. Exactly. You can, and I think that's why it's very difficult for very young people when you say, be your authentic self. And they go, which one's myself? Guess what? They are all you.
It's very important.
And that simple fact would have changed the path of my life if I'd known that at 14. Because I used to have all these dark thoughts. You know, I'd go to bed and I'd just be like choked with the fact that I'd had a horrible thought, or I felt like a right bitch, or maybe I'd been a bitch, and then that all of me is just dark and awful. And so your authentic self is all of the things that you think and feel, the good and the bad, is your authentic self. Because I think that even as grown adults, you think, oh, I still have moments where I think, who the fuck actually am I? We're not going to get the answer on that, are we, ever?
No.
So,
but again, what I love about these 3 tips, if you start with the simplest at the front, which is take a healthy interest in getting to know women. I mean, if this is specifically for Gen Z men, that's not getting to know women through porn sites. That's not getting to know women through received ideas from men who themselves are jaundiced, like a dad who goes, oh, well, all women are nags and all that. No, take an interest. And I suppose the question, the devil is in the detail. How do you actually go about that? I want to refer back again to the school swap show. And there's a beautiful moment where one of the boys, one of the black boys, went over to one of the girls and asked her on a date. And everything in me was screaming,
oh my God,
don't.
Arkansas is going to be racist. She's
And every part of me was screaming, that's no way to do it. And yet there was something in what he did that I thought, he described feeling, and this isn't a commentary on American culture, because, you know, but he just described the ability to be able to do that. And I thought, interesting, there's some inspiration to be had in that. He did it in a way that wasn't creepy. He did it in a way that was just kind of open and vulnerable. And I think making yourself vulnerable is also part of that thing of being your authentic self. And that's really hard for men and women.
My dad always says, when your child goes to school, you never see that personality again. And why is that? You go in unapologetically yourself, and then you understand that there are cruel people and people that will laugh at you and that's been the hardest thing for me as a mum, is seeing when the girls have felt humiliated by some kind of, when they've been passionate or vulnerable about something, and you watch that shrink back, and then all you do as a parent is try to lift them back so that they can open up. And it's really, it's so complex.
That can happen by friends as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Peer pressure.
We're going to play the host of the Bulwark's final tip. He has an addendum, doesn't he, which I think is really neat.
My addendum to your number 2 is what was it? Repeat how you said number 2.
Number 2, approach women with the goal of making friends.
Yeah, I agree with that, but don't trick them. Okay, so part of this was if you don't actually want to be their friend, you know, if you're only interested in sexy time, which is fine, nothing wrong with little casual sex, like then you're only setting somebody up to be sad if you trick them.
And you know what? And yourself.
Yeah.
Not just you're setting up that other person to be sad, you're setting up yourself. Because you've wiped out all the other bits of advice. You're not being your authentic self, you're not being patient, you're not actually really wanting to know that person, and it's going to collapse, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And I mean, the vast majority of issues between boys and girls, men and women, is societal pressure, which has been amplified massively by things like social media. And increased isolating, whether we like it or not. The manosphere, but also whether we like it or not, there is an increased amount of time where gaming is a huge part of this. Boys specifically spend a lot more time on their own. a lot more time at home. Our connecting and connections with our peers is happening in a digital realm, and that's dangerous. It is dangerous, and how one kind of gets round that is anyone's guess. But I think these 3 tips are sensational. Oh, and the final tip I would add as an addendum to all of this, and it's something that your dad has always said to you, is I would advise, if I had a son, make sure you can genuinely find a way to make sure in your personality that you can laugh at yourself. Because there's something
very attractive.
It's attractive, but not just, again, we're going back to the host's point there. Not in an insincere way. Don't pretend to sort of laugh at everything that's critical of you. Genuinely see just think, fucking hell, yeah, I am a bit of a nerd or a geek in this area. Or
That's another sort of a tip on how to be your authentic self.
Or if someone says to you, you're being paranoid, yeah. Sometimes, and again, this is a little bit of AA talk for you, 12-step. There is power, and I don't mean power in a corrosive, toxic, masculine way. I mean power.
Empowerment.
I mean, there's empowerment, thank you. There's empowerment in accepting powerlessness. And I think if more men and the male psyche could just go, do you know what, let go. Let go a bit more. It'd make their lives better, it'd make women's lives better. We wouldn't have as many wars.
And listen to me here, right? Straight to you, boys. This is a turn off, right? This is a turn off. When you get easily offended, you look incredibly weakened to us. Somebody that can take something in that might be difficult and then try and process it and think about it is very sexy. And another thing, I think it's really important to have this conversation with girls.
Yes.
To say, do you think he really wanted to know you? Do you think he's got any friends that are women? Do you think that when was he, so that they're also knowing what to, because this isn't just one side. Everybody's got to muck this up a bit and redress the balance that's gone totally skew-ish.
That's a really good point. And in fact, off the back of that, if you imagine, I can think of many young women who would potentially see it as a red flag wrongly. If a young boy had lots of female friends, potentially they could choose through their own toxic, through their own processing of their own toxic masculinity, their own fear. Whereas actually, really assess that, because if that is a young boy who's actually got meaningful connections with other women, then he's going to really potentially, not necessarily guaranteed, but potentially really going to know how to be around.
But then you get into the whole thing of the insecurities of the girls and so
wow, really interesting that. Really interesting.
Yeah.
And really helpful for men. I mean, right now, take it from someone who's failed, that thing of taking yourself too seriously, being able to laugh at yourself, not taking things too personally. I do think even the taking things too personally, I fall foul of that. It's part of my ADHD, it's part of my personality, it's part of my upbringing, it's all those things. It's also part of being a man who feels the pressure of wanting to be perfect, and one has to keep reminding oneself not to. If you aim for perfection and masculinity, you will end up delivering toxic masculinity.
You will end up miserable and making everyone around you miserable. I just want to ask one thing actually before we go, because we're constantly hearing what men need is a good male mole model. Mole model? Well, I like that, mole model. But you grew up without a dad, and the men that around your mum were very unsavoury, and you didn't have where did you learn to be friends with girls? And maybe that's not something you can answer now.
No, I think I can. I think a very, very important relationship for me, of all of the, and there were, as you rightly say, there were too many people who had untoward intentions. My relationship with my mum's girlfriend Lee was fundamentally, crucially important to me.
Oh yeah, because she
was much younger than my mum. She was quite close to my age, and there was a connection there. And she saw me. It makes me almost emotional.
How weird was that? You having a relationship?
She was protective of me. I saw in her the older sister I always felt I wanted. She saw in me the younger brother that she either had. I can't remember Lee, but she was very protective, and she was very. I don't know. She
mothered you.
She didn't mother. No, she didn't mother me. She looked out for me.
That's mothering, don't
Yeah, I guess so.
You didn't have.
No. She looked out for me, and so that was a role model of sorts.
And I suppose because you
could
could only think of her as non-sexually because she was having sex with your mum.
And the first time I met her, she was naked.
Yeah, so you had
So
to.
I wasn't thinking of it like
so
that.
the feelings
I
that
was
you had
7.
for her had to be feeling. Well, she wasn't that close to your age then. If you
She
were
was
7.
16.
Be careful. People will think.
Well, no,
Mum
no,
was
no, sorry.
having an
Yeah,
affair
no,
with
she was
an 8-year-old.
16. No, it was all legal. But I
Yeah.
mean, you know, she was, and as I got, she was around for
'Cause
2
your
or
mum
3
was
years. So
so
when I
young.
got to 10, she was 18, 19, you know, so it was like, oh, wow. There didn't seem, but in terms of where did that
So do you think it's just
ease with
having
women?
good? Obviously, it's great if you've got a good male role model and a good female. I tend to think you don't actually need only one another. I think a good man can bring up a child to be a good person, and I think a good woman can be. And I feel sometimes it's a bit of a scapegoat. Well, the problem is we haven't got enough good fathers. Oh, well, and it's all about just having a better father, which negates all the people that don't. Do you
I mean,
know what
I categorically know that a weird thing to say, whether you call it my intellect or my curiosity, whatever it was that allowed me to look for more in everything.
Well, you read a lot.
I found in everything what I was looking for, because I genuinely, it's not that my granddad was a bad man, he wasn't, but he was absent, he wasn't particularly present, he didn't offer any pearls of wisdom. There was a sense of security and all that kind of stuff. But
I think a lot of it for you was that you read so much. So you know, if you read a lot or you watch a lot of movies, you open up other lives for yourself, don't you? Even if you're, I mean, there'll be some people that brought up into terrible childhoods but learn a life through the television. So there's so many different ways to end up being a good person.
And just finally, I'll just give a shout out to a childhood friend, Justine, who there was never a boyfriend-girlfriend contingent to it. She was the daughter of my childminder. We became very close. We were like brother and sister. She came from a West Indian family. I was, you know, and she would sleep over all the time. There was a synchronicity between the two of us that was very natural. I mean, when I think back to it, she contacted me the other day on Instagram, and I was like, wow, yeah, we had a real sibling-like. I found what I needed in various places. So it's just weird how we do that,
so
isn't it?
Interesting. We could talk about this for hours, but we haven't got hours.
Subscribe if you haven't.
Please subscribe. Please follow The Bull Walk, BULWARK, and follow FYI Pod. That's the podcast that Cameron
And I'll put the link to the entire episode on the Bulwark that these clips came from.
Yeah.
I'll put the link under here
Listen
so
to
you
it
can go
all.
listen to the whole thing.